That's it. Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming down. This is Michael Hu. He's a PhD candidate here at NUS and he's going to be sharing how to leak a secret.
Hi everyone. Like she said, my name is Michael. I'm a PhD candidate here at NUS. Oh gosh, I still can't get used to hearing my own voice. But what I do here right now is mostly apply cryptography onto consensus protocols and network security protocols. And today, what I'll be sharing is, as the title suggests, how to leak a secret. So a quick disclaimer, how many of you are familiar with public key cryptography? Or at least know the very basics of it? Anyone? Okay, who doesn't know anything about it? All right, so hopefully I abstracted enough such that everyone can get at least a little bit of what I'm trying to say here today. Yeah, so I'm going to simplify a lot of things, but if there's any detail that you would like at any point in time, feel free to just raise your hand and ask, right? And the goal of today is not to give you an in-depth overview of what I'm talking about today. It's just mostly give you a flavor so you can go back and do your own research and learn. So I'm just sort of like opening the gates for you guys, and hopefully you're interested in it and look for it when the talk is done. So very quickly, signatures, we're talking about today when we say leak a secret, we're actually going to be extending upon signatures. And in this slide, I'll briefly talk about what signatures is or are, right? So signatures, as it is a subset of asymmetric key cryptography. Typically, it assumes some form of public key infrastructure. So you can think of it as this infrastructure that tells you that this person has this key and I can prove it. Or sometimes they have something called an ID-based cryptography, where you can put your own username or email address into this public function and it spits out a public key, right? So, for example, we just assume, if you have no idea what public key is, you can assume it as a simple key pair. Here I have S subscript I and P subscript I. The only thing you need to know is that if you, it's commutative in the sense where you put PI, SIM, it's equivalent to M and SIPIM, right? And given that SI is secret and PI is public. And the assumption is that if you have the secret key, you can generate the public key, but if you have the public key, it's impossible, or mathematically impossible to generate the secret key. And how it usually works is that if, let's say you have a private key and you want to sign something, you simply just apply your secret key, so you can think of it as SIM, and afterwards, anyone else who has the corresponding public key can verify that, okay, you have signed it, and only you could have signed it with the corresponding public key that they used to verify the message or the signature. The understanding is that it is impossible to generate a valid signature unless you know this quote-unquote secret key. And these these signature schemes usually are built upon some kind of hardness assumptions. Or so, for example, has anyone heard of RSA? So if you take any basic security class in NUS, you'll probably go through RSA. And they also go through something called LGAML, which relies on the discrete log hardness as compared to factoring hardness. So if you're not sure what factoring hardness is that if I give you two prime numbers and I multiply together, and then I just give you the actual product, it's very difficult to get the actual primes. Discrete log is that, for example, you've been given a group, a cyclic group, and I give you a particular element of that group. It's impossible, well, not impossible, but it's very difficult for you to tell me what is the exponent on the group identity to derive that particular element in the group. And nowadays, more modern-based cryptography. So for example, if you use TLS on your browser, you'll be most likely running discrete log elliptic curve, which is an extension on discrete log. And if you look further down the road, there's also lattice-based cryptography, which is supposed to be quantum proof. So, you can always have a little bit of insurance, knowing that none of your stuff will be broken in the near future. All right, so with that being said, let's get into the meat of today's talk, which is how to leak a secret with your friends. So I'm not sure if you guys have followed the news recently, but recently, it's not really a good climate to be a whistleblower. especially if the people that you're whistleblowing against has a lot of resources to maybe do a little harm towards you. So the question we would like to answer today is that can we leak a secret anonymously, but also at the same time maintain some sort of credibility, right? So the thing is that I can always leak a secret, but if it's not credible, then no one will just trust what I just leaked, right? And the answer is yes, we can actually do that with some assumptions. So here, let me just describe a scenario. And so instead of having Boeing Industries, we're going to change the name a little bit so that no one tries to attack me at the top. And we're going to be talking about mowing industries, right? So in mowing industries, you have a bunch of people with a bunch of public keys. So recall that all these public keys have a corresponding secret key. And you think of each one of these public keys as owned by an employee, right? And each employee has this corresponding secret key in their own disposal that they don't share with anyone. And you, with your own public and secret key pair, one day decides, hey, the industrial practices of mowing industry is too whack, and I want to blow the whistle. So for example, you have this document, this manifesto that says, oh, mowing industries does all these bad things. And then what happens is that if you sign the message and put it out in the wild, what's going to happen is that because your message is verifiable with your corresponding public key pair, then mowing industries can easily identify who you are and then look for you afterwards, take you aside, and then do all the crazy things that you can leave it up to your imagination. So how we resolve this is to basically use something called ring signatures. And the scheme that I'm going to talk about today is mainly the symmetric key encryption one. There's a few, the one that's more modern. So for example, just now before the start of the talk, I briefly talked about Monero. So if you know what Monero does is that they use a different form of ring signatures that assume that it has this bilinear pairing with elliptic curves. But we're going to talk about the symmetric key encryption one, which is the one that was first proposed by the authors. So RSA is Ron Rivest, Shamir, and Adil. So it's the RS of RSA who suggested this. Oh wait, okay, the animation's a bit off. But the general idea is basically, for example, if let's say I have a public-private key pair, what I do is I take a bunch of public keys, right, and I throw into this black box, which I'm just for the time being, we're going to think of it as just ring signature scheme, and it will spit out this ring signature where any person who can observe this ring signature will have no idea which person within the set of PIs, or at least P1 to PNs, has actually produced this current signature, which seems quite magical, right? How can we ensure this kind of level of anonymity? And this is what we're going to talk about today, like how this is achieved. Like I said just now, there's going to be a few schemes that basically do this, but the overarching idea, whether it's using symmetric key encryption or bilinear pairing, is exactly the same, right? So what these ring signatures are hinged upon is this thing called combining functions. And what this combining function is this jargon, which looks quite complicated, but don't worry, I'll break it down, right? Sometimes they call it the ring equation, but anyways, so you have this complicated combining function that you see has a bunch of y1 to yn. And what yi is basically applying a pi on a random xi. So so you do not need the secret key to generate the yi, right? So I can just take your public key, apply it onto any random xi to generate yi. And then in this case, EK is then a symmetric key encryption scheme where the K is just the hash of the message that you're trying to sign, right? So that's it. It looks kind of complicated, but let's simplify a little bit. Let's, instead of having it from y1 to yn, let's just have 3 public keys and abstract it a little bit as such, right? So can anyone tell me if this is difficult to do? Everything can be done with public parameters, right? For example, yk, the encryption scheme is public, right? The message is public, so you hash the message, you get the key. So the encryption, the symmetric encryption scheme is public. yi to yn is also done with the public parameter, so everything is public. And the v is also random and public. So this seems pretty easy, right? But the beautiful thing about ring signatures, or at least the combining function is that what they want to do is they want to force the output of the combining function to a particular value. And what they do is they force this particular value, let's say the output z, to be equals to y, which is the first internal XOR. Oh yeah, so if you don't know what the circle with plus is, it's an XOR operator. Right? So you want to force the output of the combining function, or the ring equation, to be the same as the random nouns that you started with. And that's where it becomes difficult, right? So one thing you can do is you can brute force for all x, the space of xi, but that's pretty slow. It's going to take forever. But let's see how we can do this more efficiently. So here I'm going to color code everything. Okay, my animation's a bit messed up. But let's just solve for, ignore the red text, but let's just solve for y2, right? So what we're going to do here is that we just want to solve y2 given the ring equation equals to v. So what you do is just basically shift everything to one side, and you get y2 equals to that equation over there. And you also know that y2 is equals to p2 on x2, and p2 being the public key parameter to your secret key. And the thing is that if you actually own the corresponding secret key to this to p2, you can actually change y2 to whatever value you want it to be. So in this case, I can simply just apply the inverse of p2, which is s2, onto x2, and I just need to force x2 to be that value. And if I force x2 to be that particular value, the ring equation will always equate to v. And that's what the red text says, that you can only do that particular step if you own one of the private keys in your ring. And that's basically how you generate a quote-unquote ring signature with only one valid key pair. Hopefully this part is clear. All right? Sorry? Okay. So, yeah, so that's the takeaway you can basically take away from this is that to generate a ring signature, you run one of these combining functions. And the goal of this is to have this combining function output to a specific value. And if you do not own any of the private keys or secret keys corresponding to one of the public keys, we can never force that combining function to output a specific value. But if you do, you can force it to output to anything. And because you do, you can force it to output to the nonce that you used to generate the combining function to begin with. And that's the beauty of it. And yeah, so in summary, if you can fix one of the xi's, you can basically do this if you have the corresponding si, which is pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. And the other thing is that if you realize that to generate this particular output, you don't really need the permission of any of the other participants. You can sort of just take their public keys and do it. It's not an interactive protocol in the sense that you don't really have to talk to them to exchange any kind of information. You just need their public keys, use those public keys to generate this signature, and then this ring signature, and share it to anyone. And anyone who sees this particular ring signature will say, okay, one of the persons from P1 to Pn generated this particular valid ring signature. And that's how you sort of hide your message amongst, or hide your identity amongst this particular ring. Right, you don't have permission of all these other people. Right, so at this point in time, we bring back to the title of this week's talk. It is to share or leak a secret with your friends. And what I will display today, right now, is that we're only sort of hiding only one person is hiding amongst a set of Pn. And sometimes people don't believe a single whistleblower, right? So imagine if, let's say, some employee decides to whistleblow on a particular company. What can happen is that people might think this is just a single disgruntled employee that's trying to cause harm to the organization. So how can we trust this single person, right? So you want to increase your credibility, and one way to do that is to increase the number of people who have signed this particular signature. But the thing is that if you own one of the secret keys, you can always generate an infinite amount of ring signatures that are valid as long as you just modify the V, right? So you can't really use this scheme n times for n employees. You need something new. And so the idea is this. Imagine you and your friends, each one of them owning a particular private and public key share, public and private key, all decide to whistleblow. And everyone knows that 4 people whistleblowing is more credible than just a single person whistleblowing. And the idea is that maybe perhaps 1 is not credible enough, but maybe in this case 4 is more credible. So let's have 4 people do the whistleblowing together. And what we have here at the end of the day is something called threshold ring signatures. The aim of it is to basically generate a particular signature with your friends, but the identity of which set of people who generate this signature is secret. So for example, let's say I have n people, and then I have this threshold, arbitrary threshold of t. And what this means is that I take any combination of t within the set of n, and they could generate a valid threshold ring signature, right? However, the math behind threshold ring signature is a bit more complicated, and I think that might be too much for this talk. So we're going to talk about something a bit more simpler, which is sort of the building block of threshold ring signature. And it comes with, it's called Shamir secret sharing, build threshold signatures. And the idea is this. So suppose I have a particular secret share that is sort of part of a larger secret. You can think of this larger secret as a threshold ring signature. And each one of you and your friends all own a particular share of this signature. Once you gather enough friends, or once you surpass a particular threshold, which usually is denoted by T, you can generate the secret, or quote-unquote, signature, right, that is valid for T of n. So why are we sharing, when we're talking about sharing secret sharing, it's a lot more simpler. I think it's a lot easier to digest. But generally, what it basically is a T of n scheme where any T can be used to recover a secret value. You can think of a secret value as a valid signature, right? And then it can be extended to build threshold signatures. But the thing is that Shamir secret sharing is not the only way to build threshold signatures, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And the question is you might be asking yourself is how can you have a bunch of people work together to generate a particular secret with only their secret shares? And the answer is polynomial interpolation. Almost all threshold schemes apply some form of interpolation to generate a particular shared secret. So let me give you an example, right? So if you have a line on a I guess graph or whatever, you can have, if you have any 2 points, you can generate a line, right? If you have, let's say, a quadratic curve, 3 points, you can generate the curve back. So the idea is that if you have any polynomial with degree d, you can generate the polynomial if you can have any d plus 1 distinct points on the curve, on whatever curve you have, right? That's the meat of it. So the idea is this. The secret is basically just the curve, right? I have this curve that intersects the y-axis at some particular point, right? And then I give all of my participants a particular point on the curve. So if, let's say, I have a polynomial of degree t, what happens is that I just need t plus 1 of you guys to work together to generate the curve again, and then find where the curve intersects y-axis, and that's your secret. Or you can think of the secret as your signature, right? And there's a few kinds of interpolation. The one I just described, which uses the actual discrete points on the curve, is what they call the Lagrange interpolation. However, there's also other forms of interpolation like Hermite interpolation, Birkhoff interpolation, and they all vary a little bit. So for example, for Hermite interpolation, instead of using the actual points, you can use the points provided and the derivatives at those points, which is a bit more general. And then you can go even more general with Birkhoff interpolation, which is sometimes known as Hermite-Birkhoff, which is you can take any point and any derivative at any point to generate to basically interpolate and get the curve. The problem is that once you generalize to that degree, sometimes your solution is not unique, and you might have a not so accurate interpolation, right? Okay, so let's talk about language interpolation. Looks complicated. I promise you it's not. It's very simple. So suppose you have this polynomial, px of degree d equals t minus 1, and then you want to have a t of n scheme, right? So each part, like I said, each participant is given a particular point on the polynomial. And then you have any one of these participants collect t points in that form, right? So we have a two-dimensional graph. And afterwards, you just plop in that particular equation to generate t language basis polynomials. You don't have to know exactly how to do that. Just plop the equation in. Well, it comes out with some particular language basis polynomials. And there you go. You have the exact polynomial. Oh, sorry. And then to generate the secret, you just put x equals 0, and then that's your particular secret. So an example is here, I lifted up from Wikipedia, right? So you have px equals that polynomial. You can generate more points than that, but for this example, I generated just 3 points. And then suppose you collected these 3 points. You just use that equation from the last slide, generate the language basis polynomials, use that together with the points that you collected, and bam, there you go. That's the polynomial. It's that simple, right? And that's how you basically, have a bunch of secret shares, combine them together, generate a particular secret. And the beauty of this is that it doesn't really matter which points you take, at least for language basis, language interpolation. It doesn't really matter which point you take. Any t points is sufficient, or I think it's t plus 1 points. And that's it. No more math. So some of you might be like, oh, thank God, no more math. So at this point onwards, what we're going to do is just talk about what we can do, right? So if you're interested, you can just Google what the scheme is, what the protocol is, and just find out more about it. So what we talked about so far is basically a very, very small part of what we want to do, what we want to achieve, which is threshold ring signatures. We talked about Shamir secret sharing, and we talked about how ring signatures, at least the symmetric key one, operates on. Shamir secret sharing can be used to build treasure signatures. However, there's also other kinds of interpolation that can be used to build treasure signatures. And then afterwards, you can combine treasure signatures with ring signatures to get some form of threshold ring signature schemes. And just to define threshold signatures again, it's similar to a T of n threshold signature scheme. However, which combination of that T is hidden? And there's a few various extensions. And this is where I think is the interesting thing. We have these schemes. The reason why I'm sharing these is that one of the things about applying cryptography is knowing that it exists, right? Because you have no idea if it exists, then you'll never apply them. So this is sort of like an introductory slide of these are all the wonderful things you can do with cryptography, and then you can maybe use it in your applications, use it in your software, or whatever. So here are some extensions. So one of the possible extensions is something called flexible threshold ring signatures. Previously, what we discussed, right, was that you have n participants, and you take any t to generate a valid threshold ring signature, right? The problem becomes is that what if I want to also participate in this scheme? So imagine this, right? We have n participants. You and your t friends generated a signature. And then some manager comes by, suspects you of whistleblowing and say, hey, I want to join in your scheme, and let's generate a ring signature together. Then the manager knows who all these participants are, and I will just report you to the company boss and whatever. Flexible threshold ring signatures, the beauty of it is that you can take an existing threshold ring signature and just increase the threshold, add t to be t plus 1, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So essentially, you have n as your ring. Suppose you have a valid threshold ring signature of t of n scheme. Flexible threshold ring signatures allows you to take that existing signature without any communication with the people who actually generated it to add your participation into it. So that's pretty cool. But can someone tell me what are some of the possible issues of such a scheme as we increase t? Anyone? Yes.
It forks in different directions.
It forks in different directions. Oh, okay, so the beautiful thing about these kind of things is that if you participated once, you can't do it again. So you mean as in like there's 2 participant sets growing, right?
Yeah, like the second and third both contribute to the first.
Right.
Not to like the third doesn't build on the second.
That's a possible problem, but what you could do in general is just take the maximum of those 2, and that's like just a thing you can't do any better than that. But along that line, is there any other possible issues we can encounter? Yes.
The order of decryption must be
the order of decryption, not exactly. It's not really a problem. So for threshold signatures, there is no decryption involved. It's just verification. So the signature just verified. There's no need to do any kind of decryption. Well, one of the main problems you can encounter with flexible threshold signatures is that you're increasing the threshold, right? Eventually, you will hit n, and then you just know everyone in the set participated, and just go for everyone. So recently, what happened was these guys found out a way to extend the ring. So basically solving the problem where, if t increases up till n, that would just increase n to be greater, right? And what they do, what this is called extendable threshold ring signatures, which is a two-part protocol. The first scheme is where you can increase your t of n threshold scheme to be t plus 1 of n, or you can also make it to t of n plus 1 scheme. So every time, for example, let's say I want to join in your whistleblowing scheme, and instead of just dragging myself into it, I also add a bunch of other public keys into it to hide myself from whoever's trying to sign the particular message. I think that's pretty cool. And the other thing is, we talked about how we can increase our credibility by having more participants in our group, right? But when you're in an organization, not all identities are equal. So, for example, having a low-level employee whistleblow something might not be as credible as having, let's say, a manager actually whistleblow on it, right? Because managers know more, so they might be more credible. And as of now, there is no scheme that is able to do such a thing, right? So, let me just skip a few slides. Okay, so when we talk about different hierarchy in your organization, you want, say, for example, managers to have more signing power than, like, let's say, low-level employees, right? But it's a bit counterintuitive because you can't really, the moment you have certain participants having more value, you leak that weight to whoever was trying to verify the signature. So there's no way to actually have hierarchical threshold ring signatures, right? So how can we do that? Well, actually what happens is that in the original threshold ring signature paper, they mentioned something quite interesting, which is the general case for threshold ring signatures. And what they call it is threshold ring signatures for ad hoc groups. And what they mean by ad hoc groups is that instead of declaring a ring that you hide your participation within, what you could do is you can declare a bunch of sets, and then have this family of sets. And what you do basically is that when you generate a valid signature, the participants of that particular threshold ring signature scheme is a particular subset of that family of sets. So for example, in this case, I have 4 participants, A, B, C, D, and I declare a bunch of sets. For example, A, B, C, D. And then what threshold ring signatures do is that you can basically have any of these sets generate a valid signature. So B can do it himself, CD can do it together, AB can do it together, and so forth. I guess AB together is a bit counterintuitive here. But the idea is that your signature is then hidden amongst one of these sets. So when someone looks at this particular signature, they can say that, okay, one of these particular sets actually participated to generate a signature, but I have no idea which set actually did this. And the beauty of this is that you can actually sort of do a very expensive weighted threshold, hierarchical threshold ring signature scheme with this kind of generalization. And the reason why I showed this is because this is as powerful as you go, right? Because you can declare all the sets, and you can use any of these sets to generate a valid signature. And that's it. So sorry if it's a bit loaded and if it's a bit fast. But today what we've talked about is basically ring signatures or combining functions and how they work, or at least how they work in the asymmetric key encryption sense. We also talked about Shamir secret sharing, which uses language interpolation to build on to threshold signatures. And we also talked about some various extensions on threshold ring signature schemes and some other variants. So that's it. If you're interested about these kind of schemes, you want to know a little bit more details, feel free to approach me at another talk and we can discuss and you can ask questions and all that. Right. Thanks everyone. there any questions? Is it too math heavy? Should be fine, right? Great. All right. Yes.
For like the final ad hoc groups example, which
Yes.
is still like verify the signature with everyone.
That's the beauty of it. When you have this ad hoc structure, right, what actually happens is that you declare the structure, right? In the paper they call this a family of sets. So what happens is that this structure as it is, right, is declared in a particular order. So for example, AB, in this case you have AB as a set, and then B as a set, CD as a set. You can't sort of rotate them around. It has to be in that particular order. And it's that order that that you use to verify. Yeah. Right. So I know I have like 45 minutes, and a little bit of time. So there's actually a little bit of maybe we're not talking about this. Let's talk about hierarchical threshold signatures, right? The other benefits of having hierarchical threshold signatures is that, for example, one of the main applications of threshold signatures in today, right, is to speed up verification. So for example, if you have any kind of consensus protocols or any kind of basically, if let's say I want to ask every one of you for a response to a question, one way to do it is that I verify each one of your signatures independently, right? And that's basically ON. With threshold signatures, I can do it in constant time, which is pretty great. And threshold signatures, basically you have a T of N scheme. So I don't need all of your answers, I just need T of your answers. Hierarchical threshold schemes, basically I weight some of you. Some of your answers are more important to me than others, right? So yeah, in some sense you share a weight. And there's two types of hierarchical threshold signatures. There's conjunctive and disjunctive. So you can think of it as, for example, let's say I have three layers in my hierarchy: the president, the managers, and the employees. Disjunctive, basically the threshold is met if any particular layer's threshold is met. So for example, I can have 2 presidents, or 5 managers, or 20 employees. Conjunctive is a little bit more different. I need at least 1 president and at least 2 managers and at least 5 employees to generate a valid signature. So there's 2 kinds. And and it's usually built upon this thing called Hermite-Birkhoff interpolation. We said that you could basically do interpolation with any point in its derivative. And the beauty of it is that some points are not equal to others. It's better to have the actual points on the curve than its derivatives and the second degree derivatives and so forth. So that's why you might have, when you run this kind of interpolation, you might have non-unique solutions, right? And those non-unique solutions is used to identify who actually signed it. So that's the sort of quote-unquote intuition behind this kind of hierarchical threshold schemes. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thanks, everyone.